Hi guys. Um, Sorry I missed the meeting. Um, you guys have them really early here. We're definitely behind in Idaho, and it's a different time in El Salvador too. Um, but I actually really like this case, and I got more into it than I normally would have in any other case because, unlike our other cases, this case happened, um, and it was real. And I looked through different news articles of it just and I was so impressed with um, how accurately it was reported by the different news things. They all had the same story, it seemed like. Um, and then relating it back to the case study, it was abridged, so it didn't have like all the detail. In fact, the case study that we all read didn't even list all 7 members of the crew. I Googled that and found that on a news website to include it in my case study write up. Um, so I'll just read you guys my situation analysis. Um, and this again, these are like my views, so this is what we're doing this for. Anyways, just under a minute and a half after NASA launched Columbia, a piece of thermal insulation foam broke off and left a large hole in the wing of the shuttle. Engineers were worried and said they should analyze and fix the situation, but NASA decided that they'd be fine and they took the risk. Due to budget cuts, the cameras that were recording that and on the space shuttle, they weren't 100% able to identify the size of the hole. Upon Googling that, I found out it was about 6 inches. Um, but yeah, once again, it was due to budget cuts. But while the photographs were unclear, the group did have the distinct impression that the piece of foam was unusually large, larger than they had seen. And then on February 1st, the shuttle was rescheduled to re-enter the atmosphere. However, by flight day 8, so that's January 24th, Boeing had analyzed the possible threat of Columbia coming back into orbit, and they were terrified. They had 5 different scenarios that they had collected and gathered during meetings of what could happen on landing day. But turns out on February 1st at about 8:59, Columbia landed in Florida, and when it landed, it just fell apart, um, and it killed the 7 crew members if they weren't already dead from depressurization on the way down, due to that small foam piece that was missing. NASA responded quickly, and they informed their employees and the public of the tragedy. Um, Upon researching this a little bit more, I found that debris landed in Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas. ABC News reported that hundreds of people in Texas using handheld global positioning satellites to pinpoint locations, and they were searching for debris and marking it off sites. One lady on ABC reported that she found what looked like body parts in Texas. So, I mean, this was a horrible explosion, and I don't know why it really struck me, but it did. And so my analysis is this is by far the saddest case that I've had to read for this class. It makes it worse that it's real and when it's on the news. There are so many different aspects that made me cringe as I read the case and found sources on the internet. NASA seems to have a rough go on this whole project thing. Well, they have amazing talent and knowledge. Maybe wisdom is what lacked regarding the Columbia. Um, they were used to just a project, not a repeat of the same actions. Um, and I feel like if they would have tested the Columbia out more and paid more attention and were much more specific, they would have caught this sooner and they wouldn't have just let it slide. They would have seen it as a bigger life threatening deal that it was. Um, so just analyzing um, the people that were involved in this. Obviously, there were the 7 crew members, and I don't feel like they were to blame. But if I were to cast the blame, it could be maybe the President of the United States at the time, Congress, the White House, the Department of Defense. All of these since the 1970s have denied increasing the budget in some way to NASA to further research and expand. I feel like if NASA's budget would have been bigger in the 70s, they would have had the resources to solve problems that occurred in the following years, such as this one, like with the whole camera deal. To fit within their budget, NASA wanted to win customers, so they lowered their commercial launch contract heavily by subsidizing it to $42 million per launch, which is only 1/3 of the actual cost. I mean, think about the budget constraint there. Like, if 42 million is subsidizing it and that's only 1/3 of the budget cost, holy cow. So I feel like NASA kind of fell into a trap. They felt kind of pressured with the budget, and they wanted to still impress customers um, with increasingly like more techie technology. Um, and NASA is bureaucratic, so they create barriers for barriers' sake, but they're trying to like. I thought of them as kind of like a child with one of those little safety gates that a mom puts at the stairs. It's like if the mom was to put two of those safety gates 2 steps above, just in case, like it's kind of unnecessary. So I feel like because of that, the NASA employees were able to find little loopholes and make little exceptions, like letting a space shuttle with a tiny piece of missing foam go up. Because they just kind of fell into a trap of outside motivation. They wanted success and thought that being cheap would be okay, even though cheap wasn't really cheap, but maybe to them it was. Um, I wonder if they thought about the safety of the 7 crew members when the engineers recommended that they should stop and fix the hole in the wing. I feel like NASA got super excited and just winged it. No pun intended. Whoops. So my second issue that I analyzed is the work controls and the employee controls. Work controls are things such as control systems. It's about getting one safely to an endpoint. It could also be a physical barrier to protect you. In this case, the physical barrier, which I'm going to say was the foam, was removed. With just one physical barrier being removed or damaged, it allows for other things to go wrong. I also feel like the administrative controls were not up to par. I know they have policies and regulations for NASA. Hello, they send people into space. That's kind of a big deal. The first sign was in the making of the Columbia. Records show that on April of 1981, that 300 tiles had to be replaced. Then in January of 1990, the second left known bipod ramp foam event occurred. I found that towards the end of the case study on some reports that were there with some charts and stuff. But it kind of sounded like Columbia had a rough go from the very beginning. It just kind of had bad luck. But according to policy, I'm assuming that you shouldn't send something into space that's broken. My third issue that I kind of focused on was engineering, like the engineered / system controls. So the software and engineering and computer systems all said that something was wrong. They warned of it. This was basically ignored and the shuttle was sent off anyways. While the shuttle was in orbit, Boeing analysts, including a Crater-certified engineer, used the program only twice to perform the analysis. He did not check with other engineers who had previously used the program in California. Crater is a computerized mathematical tool that uses algorithms to predict how deep debris will penetrate the tiles. However, Crater did not take into account the denser bottom level of the tile and that foam on the wing of the space shuttle. So it was more of a curve fit based on some data. Data was not completely reliable. And then the case said that one expert described Crater as not really an analytical model. It's more of a curve fit based on some data completely outside the range of the situation. So it really was discounted. They knew that Crater was not 100% accurate with its predictions, yet the following flight days, they still accredited it as reliable and made other plans based off of what Crater said. So it's like they started with a rocky foundation and just tried to build their house upon sand. Didn't do well for them. My action plans for these situations are for Crater. It needs to be updated, maybe redesign it, create a technology, maybe starting from the bottom, that can measure denser levels of tile, maybe add high-tech features so that it can be used in several things and for several depths. Make a policy that each space station has at least 3 Crater specialists. This one just had 1 Crater specialist, so I feel like 3 witnesses is definitely better than 1. And then my other solution for my action plan as a third-party member is the space shuttle program. I don't want to like sound mean on this or anything. This is just what I think. Um, but from the very beginning, when President Nixon allowed the space shuttle program to begin in 1972, it was on a tight budget. It had extremely difficult design specifications. To me, the program jumped the gun on a lot of things. The case says that, for example, to meet scheduled demands during development, the agency deviated from protocol and allowed the newly designed SRBs and external tanks to be ground tested rather than tested in flight. NASA also used analytical models rather than an unmanned flight test to verify the entire system. The company culture seemed to be to spend as little money as possible and expect amazing results. It's like finding a free photographer or a cheap photographer for like a big event like your wedding. You know that generally you get what you pay for. And with this tight budget, it was kind of hard to get the best results. So I just think, now this is my opinion, but I think the space shuttle program in that time needed a bigger budget. Maybe instead of getting a set budget, they should have like a budget range and try and fit within there. For example, right now, the president's budget request enacted budget for 2017 is $19,653.3 million. I found that on nasa.gov. I opened a PDF and searched through a bunch of fiscal reports and found that on there. But then on the flip side, I was thinking about it and I was like, is spending that much on a rocket ship that necessary? How important is it to research outer space? We either need to get rid of the space program or double the budget to ensure safety and quality. I know there's two different like have there, but they both work. But I also thought like, or just maybe the space shuttle program shouldn't be government sponsored. It should be an independent business. That way our taxes aren't going into it. However, the risk that I found with this, the risk with Crater, is that there won't be 3 Crater specialists at each station. They could also be another error in the system where they discover that Crater isn't equipped to measure some other thing, like they'll find something else wrong with it. And just another glitch that could cause death again. The risk with the space shuttle program shutting down is that all those employees will lose their jobs. How will they provide? People who are like space fanatics, they'd get offended. People would riot in the streets. If the space program was to double the budget, I don't think every taxpayer would necessarily appreciate that, considering that it's kind of hard for a person's quality of life to be improved by a space shuttle going up. So basically the risk with both solutions would result in people getting offended, but that's their choice. Like I said, I absolutely enjoyed this case, and I hope you guys have a great week.